My great-grandmother, Leontine Braud Allen, was born into slavery in 1846 in St. James Parish, Louisiana. She was enslaved until she was 19, freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, at which time she married George Allen, who was a corporal in the Louisiana State Colored Troops, fighting on the side of the North in the Civil War. My great-grandmother lived to be 102, meaning that she didn't die until 1948, 3 years after the war ended, and my experience in that Jim Crow Union Hall. My mother, who was raised by my great-grandmother, was born in 1894 and lived to be 101, dying in 1995. And I was born in 1921, and I'm still here. That means that I was 27 years old, married, and a mother by the time my slave ancestor died. I knew her as the matriarch of my family, and she had raised all of the significant adults in my life, including my mother. It was my mother's younger sister who was closest to Mama, who was what we called my great-grandmother. Mama and Vivian would tell stories about how at the end of the day, in that little cabin in St. James Parish across from the Mississippi, after the kids were all in bed, my great-grandmother would send her to a brick in the fireplace that she would remove, and would remove from that little pipe and tobacco pouch that she would present to my great-grandmother, and then trundle off to bed as my great-grandmother ended the day by sitting beside the fireplace, smoking her pipe. My favorite story, because Vivian was full of them, was that my great-grandmother was the town midwife. She delivered all the babies who were born in St. James Parish, which was a very small community, actually. I don't know whether that included white babies, but it might have. They would have been the plantation owners. Dr. Heidel was the traveling doctor who would come through about every 3 months on horseback. And he would assign my grandmother, Mama, to riding on her horse in the weeks preceding his visits. On horseback, she would go out and drape on the day before, or a couple of days before he was due to arrive, white towels on the fence, on the gateposts of all the places where he was to visit. That was her job. She would accompany him on his rounds, and then he would confer with her before taking off on the aftercare of the patients. She was a very important woman. I don't know whether or if she was paid for her services, but that she was the midwife of that village, which was an honorable job during a time when women's roles were very limited, had always been important to me. And I realized late in my life, at a time when I had gotten to the place where I was receiving awards for just living, not feeling worthy of such awards. On one of those honorings, it was by the Women's History Project of the Women's National History Project, in ceremonies in Washington, D.C., where I, again, was going to be receiving an award that I just didn't feel comfortable about. On that trip, I visited in Anacostia, the African American Museum, and there happened to be an exhibit of the midwives of the Civil War. And I got to walk around seeing in huge photographs, pictures of those women and those rooms in which they worked, the beds, the blanketings. I found myself absolutely overcome with emotion because it was the first time I could visualize my great-grandmother in that role that had become so important in my life. That evening, I was at the Hay Hotel just across from the White House, being honored for yet another time, and suddenly feeling that I could not accept this proclamation in my own name because I hadn't yet earned that right, but I could in the name of my great-grandmother. And so that night, I stood on camera, told her story, and accepted that honor in her name when I realized that throughout my life, I had known those stories from Vivian, my Aunt Vivian, and that I had patterned my life after the life of my great-grandmother, that I had been offered many opportunities to aspire even either to public office, heads of committees, during civil rights revolution onto national committees. I always had cast myself in the role of helper, that was the role I accepted, that I had been placing imaginary white towels on imaginary gateposts all of my life. And it's in words of Stephen Sondheim, children will listen, because that is the way I see myself. I saw myself then. I saw myself as a field representative, a member of the California State Assembly on 2 occasions. I see myself playing that role for the National Park Service, even now, because I am still draping white towels over imaginary gateposts.